On today's episode of First Rodeo Radio, we welcome on Ray Handal, who is about to have the first horse in his stable that is part of First Rodeo, and an Oscar Performance colt that is a 2-year-old, still training up down in Ocala. So very excited for that. In this conversation, we highlight Ray's introduction to the sport, going back to handicapping with his dad in Jamaica, to his early influences that led him to become a trainer, what exactly prompted and gave him the confidence to make the jump to become a trainer for himself, some of the milestones along the way, some of his training philosophies, as well as his future outlook for the sport. We hope you enjoy this conversation with Ray Handal.
First Rodeo Radio, where the race begins. The homies have reached the starting gate, and they're off.
Welcome to another episode of First Rodeo Radio. Today we are joined by none other than Ray Handal. Thanks for joining us, Ray.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
Good times. Looking forward to the first horse that will have you train for First Rodeo. I feel like it's been a long time coming here, so definitely exciting times there.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped to get him up. He looked great in Ocala last week when I saw him.
Yeah, I feel like we'll probably get into him a little bit later and kind of the process there. I might bombard you with a few questions that I fielded from a few of the partners, but I think it might be cool to kind of start us all the way back when you first began. I think your start to racing wasn't too dissimilar to mine from like a handicapping point of view, you tell me, but you were handicapping tracks in Jamaica, right, with your dad?
Yeah, that was it. I was very young, and I like to tell people that I could read a racing form before I could read a book. Now we bonded over it. My dad was visually impaired. He has a degenerative disease, so as he got older, it got progressively worse. So he would kind of crutch on me more and more, and it kind of became like our father-son thing we would do on the weekend, and even during the week, we'd handicap the races. Even if we weren't out, like, gambling, we would be, like, picking horses, and then that was back before phones, so we'd call in and get the results after and see who was right and stuff. It was a fun journey, and, even now, I just talked to my dad on the way home from the barn, so we pretty much speak every day and talk racing and, other stuff, but a lot of racing involved.
What got your dad into the sport originally?
His brother, Robert, they just liked betting horses. They grew up in Jamaica and they would like save up their lunch money and they would go on Fridays or like once a week and go to the racetrack and they would skip school and my uncle would take my dad's the baby, so they would all sneak him in because he was underage and he just kind of got the bug from there.
I love it. Do you have
Yeah.
any like memorable scores that you and your dad had when you guys were teaming up there?
Well, he tells me this really funny story. This is before me, but when he was like, it is very young, and they were doing one of their like weekdays at skipping school in Jamaica, and he, I guess there was like some photographer that was at the track that day, and they got a picture of my dad and his brother and their friend, and my dad was like biting the racing form, and he had it in his mouth, and oh, man, I'm messing up the story because there was, like, some kinda headline, and, anyways, my dad comes home that day, and my grandfather saw the paper the next day, and he was, like, super ticked at him, and, like, they got their butts whooped. But, yeah, it was, we have a lot of great memories growing up, think back to we grew up in Florida, so we were at Calder most of the time. So there was we just would go and it was a very racetracker's racetrack back then, and it wasn't all the glitz and glamour. But yeah, I'm kind of drawing some blanks. But we spent so many moments. He took me to my first Breeders' Cup. We went to Arlington. I won tickets riding Article as a little kid. They had this thing called Kids to the Cup and, there's a lady, Trudy McCaffrey, who owned horses out in California, and she'd give out tickets to, like, an all-paid ride to the Breeders' Cup every year, and I won it one year. I was like 12 years old, and my dad and I went out to that Breeders' Cup, and it was pretty epic.
It's amazing. I think you weren't too dissimilar from your dad that you were skipping school at some point too,
I
right?
was. I was, yeah. To his dismay, I drove him nuts when I was like 15. I was just like dead set on horse racing and being a trainer, and it was all I ever wanted to do. And I tortured him, bless his heart, for like, because he's like any dad. You want to finish school and then pursue your career, but I wasn't having it. Like school wasn't for me, and I just was like, I was locked in. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And so, yeah, I was skipping school. I'd take the bus and go out to Calder, and I'd hot walk for the guy named Larry Bates who passed. He's a local, local legend down at Calder. Everybody knows who he was. And yeah, I just kind of went off from there. But when I was old enough to leave home, I did, and I was just like, "Dad, I want to do this thing for real." And he was always supported me, but with some reservations. I promised him that I would go back and like, get my GED and do the right things, and I did. I went back and I got my GED, and I got a 2-year degree and actually in Lexington. So,
Yeah, and I get you were what, like 15, 16 when you left home, so I feel like that's like
mm-hmm.
young, I feel like in like modern America. Was that part of your Jamaican upbringing that like is that like a
Yeah.
rite of passage at 16 in Jamaica?
Yeah, I mean, I was always very much beyond my years, even like growing up. I didn't really like I had like my friends and my buddies that we'd go out and have fun with and stuff, but I was always just very locked in at a very young age, and it's all I ever wanted to do. And I know I see 15-year-olds nowadays walking around. I'm like, I can't believe I was living on my own. They're little like children. So, yeah, I had really good people around me though that kind of put me in the right direction. Everywhere I went, I had like very, fatherly, motherly figures that gave me great guidance. And I worked really hard, and people saw that, and that I was determined, so they wanted to help me. It's just like, so that I pass that on, like when I see people nowadays that I've kind of, been established in my career, and people trying to make it. It was so tough, so I try and help out people when I can to give them some opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's part of the beauty of the backstretch too. It's like its own little community, own little world back there. People do help each other out.
Yeah,
I guess like
totally.
when you first like what's kind of going through your head when you're first, moving out, moving, I presume like onto one of the housing spots on the backstretch. Like take me through those early days, like at
Uh,
any point where you're like ready to quit.
no, I loved it. I loved it. I was like, "Hell yeah, this is all me, man." I was so pumped. My first, like so I was working for Larry. I was hot walking at Calder, and he was like, none of his guys wanted to leave for the summer to go to Colonial Downs, and Colonial was like riding cheap races on the grass. This is way back in the day before they closed and opened again. And he was like, "I could really use you up there," and I was like, "I'm in." And then that's when I kind of told my dad, I was like, "I'm leaving. I'm doing this. I'm gonna go up to Colonial, and then we'll see where we go from there. Maybe I'll come back, but I might just kind of roll with it and just keep on going." And so I got up to Colonial, and their dorms are like they're like little trailer. It's like split into three, and I had a middle room with like two other dudes that groomed for Michael Chimbetta, and they were cool. They were like, if you put in, they were like, just give us like $50 a week, and well, we cook dinner, and then you got to get your food, in between. So I'd give them like $50, and they'd cook every night, and it was great. And I remember I couldn't wake up early. It was like the worst. I still struggle nowadays, but I'd get to the barn every day. I'd get in there extra early because I'd get to the barn, and I would just, like, sit on the chair, and I'd nap for, like, 45 minutes until everybody got there, because if I didn't, like, get out of bed when all the guys did, I wouldn't wake up. So they'd all get up, like, at, 4:30 to go groom, and I'd get up with them and go sit at the barn and sit in the chair and snooze. And I remember I saw somebody that remembered me from way back in the day. He's like, "Oh, you're the kid that was always sleeping in the chair," and I was like, "Yeah, that's me."
That's pretty funny. I
Yeah,
actually
but it's
just
great.
I just interviewed like Jose Santos Jr. yesterday, and I
That's
was
my
like
boy.
prepping for that. Yeah, he said you guys grew up running around Calder together.
Yeah, now we're, like, best friends. Now we hang out, like, every time for the last couple of years, we've been kinda, like we've really been tight. So since he's come back here to New York, but he's great. Yeah, I mean, I'd babysit him at Calder or at Gulfstream in the winter times when his mom would like run off. She's like, "Oh, just go sit with them," and we would just hang out for the day and stuff.
That's awesome. It's pretty
Yeah, it's
pretty full
cool.
circle for sure.
Yeah, for sure. He's a great dude.
So So I guess like so you're haven't graduated high school. You're like, all right, Dad, I'm moving to Virginia to go live at Colonial and groom horses, get to know the game. Like, did you have any like sort of like master plan of like, did you sit down with Larry
That
like,
was
how do
funny.
I become a trainer, or like you're just like, I'm just roll with the punches?
Well, I knew there were certain points I needed to hit along my way, but kind of the stuff in between was just like rolling, I was just gonna roll with it. So when I got to Colonial that summer, I ran into a buddy of mine that I knew from he was a gambler on the racetrack. He had trained in the past, and he had actually had 2 horses of his own, Michael D'Angelo, um, and he was Jonathan Shepard's assistant. And I remember just hanging out with him, and I was like, I don't really want to go back to Calder. I want to kind of stay up here. I was like, I want to go to Saratoga, and I want to be up there. I'd love to go to the meet up there. It's the best. And so he's like, well, I think Jonathan needs, grooms up there. He's always desperate for help, just like we always are. Everybody is, even nowadays. And he's like, I'm sure, we can work something out and get you on the van and get you up there they can use your grooming. And I was like, all right, sounds good. As the meet progressed, I let Larry know that I wasn't going to be coming back to Calder and I was going to go to Saratoga for Jonathan Shepard. So I get everything set up, hop in the van with my knapsack, and we had to stop off at Jonathan's farm. It's in Pennsylvania, in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And we were supposed to stay, like, lay over overnight and then load up and go to Saratoga the next day, and they were having problems with the truck. The truck, like, it broke down or something, so I had to stay for, like, a few more days, and I was kinda like I was at this farm, I was like, "Man, this place is beautiful," and I always wanted to learn how to ride, and everybody told me, "If you wanna learn how to ride, you gotta start at a farm," and so I was like, "This place is great." The lady that was running the farm, Amy, she was super cool, and they needed help. They're like, "Listen, if wanna work, there's a lot to do around here, but we'll teach you how to ride." We have a pony. They had, like, this 20-something-year-old pony named Chiquita. It was, Jonathan Shepard's favorite polo pony. They're like, "We'll let you ride her every day, and you can learn, but, it's gonna be a lot." And so I canceled my plans to go to Saratoga, and I was like, "I'm just gonna stay here." And I moved into Jonathan Shepard had a house for the help, like, a mile down the road, and I was, like, grinding away and working my tail off, and, I think I rode the pony for, like, 2 months, and then one day, like, all of the riders were, like, called in. They had all been drinking all night or something like that, and they were like, "We need you to," like, they knew I couldn't gallop horses, but you can jog. Like, they put me on, like, 15 joggers one day, and I was just like after that, it was over. I just started jogging, so then my set list became I started riding, like, 7 or 8 joggers every day, and that was it, and then I did that for, like, 2 or 3 months. And then something similar happened where a bunch of people didn't show up and I started galloping and they needed me to gallop. So I started galloping and like within 1 year, I from never sitting on a horse, I'd become like one of the better riders over there and kind of moved up the ranks. And I went back to Colonial Downs the next year as an exercise rider. And it was my first time on the racetrack galloping. And so, it was just like, it was really cool. I'm trying to remember where I ended up. I think after that fall, after Colonial, I didn't wanna do another winter up north, and I was like, "I can't do this cold." And I ended up linking up with, a friend of mine, that took me down to Palmettos. I was 18 at the time, and I was gonna gallop for Michael Matz, and, he had great people working for him. This is right when, like this is post Barbaro. I think he was actually still alive when I was there. And, he had Peter Brett there and Greg Kennedy, who was his 2 assistants, who are really good friends of mine who I still stay in touch with to this day, and they really helped me a lot there. I really learned a lot of fine-tuning my skills, and then we went back to, like, that Maryland area, and I was there for a long time. You can cut me off if I'm rambling too much 'cause this is
No,
good.
it's not. I think it's kind of cool to hear the full story. I think
Okay.
what's wild is like it started with like a truck breaking down. If that truck didn't break down, who knows kind of like what would
What the
have
path would
happened.
have been, yeah. So I get down there and I love Palmettos. Who doesn't? It's Delray Beach. I lived in a studio shack right on the water, and I would, it was terrible. It was like, 200 square feet or something. Uh, and yeah, galloping with Michael that one winter was great, and then he knew I wanted to like see different things and go different places. So he sent me to Keeneland for that spring meet there, and I had a great time there. Went back, and then I was supposed to trying to remember what happened. Yeah, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I worked for him for a year at Fair Hill and did Florida, and then the following year I went to Keeneland and I stayed. I loved Kentucky so much. He sent me to Keeneland that I decided to stay there, and I remember I got a job with Kenny McPeak, and that's where I ended up spending like 3 years in Lexington working for Kenny. And Kenny was great. He really kind of pulled the curtain back and let me see how like there's the training and horseman side, but there's also a business side of things. And Kenny showed me like, here's your structure, here's how, you get, this is how you manage clients. You have your people in here and he had his office people and everything was very structured. And I learned a lot from him. And I wouldn't say he gave me a ton of one-on-one, but everything that he said, I just soaked in and listened to every single word that he said because he had a tremendous amount of knowledge. And I wish I would have spent more time with him and got to do the sales because he's so successful buying young horses at the sale. I did one sale with him, but he had a whole entourage following him around, and I just felt like I was bugging him. So I did like 2 or 3, or yeah, one sale for like 2 or 3 days. But that was really fun. I had a great time, and I ended up leaving. I kinda bounced around a few different jobs. I worked for Christophe Clement for a little bit, but he was pretty overstaffed. Like, I wanted to be an assistant at this point when I left Kenny's, and I worked for Christophe, and it just wasn't really working out. And then I was galloping. I just decided to take a gallop job, and I galloped for Rick Dutrow. I kinda wanted to just have fun one summer. I was, like, Saratoga, and I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna regroup and get back on my path. I'm gonna have some fun." So I just took a gallop job for Rick, and actually, it was great. I loved working for him. We had a great summer. He had that was the summer, like, he had Willie Beeman and a few other really I think he won some other big races, but it was a really good educational, and I didn't really think it at the time, but I learned a lot from him. Sorry, my allergies are terrible. But then after the summer, I was like, I really wanna buckle down, and I was like 21 at the time or 22, and I knew I loved Tony Dutrow, and I loved Tony Dutrow, like, betting his horses back in the day, and I was always wanted to work for him um, before I started training. It was a big target for me, and I met obviously working for Rick, I met the rest of the family, and Kim, his wife, was, like, super cool. Like, when I met them the first time, I'm, like, rattling off all their good horses they've had and, like, even the horses at Delaware Park and all these other random bits of knowledge that I was and they really, you know, they were flattered. They could see I would love the game and I wanted to do more. Tony thought I was too young, and he was like, "Maybe another 5 or 6 years, we can revisit this." And I can't remember who I was galloping for at the time. I think I went to New Orleans for Neil Howard, and I got a call from them, and they're from Kim, Tony's wife, and they're like, "Hey," or actually, no, it might have been Tony. Says, "Hey, are you still interested in the assistant job?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I have a division in New York that needs some help, and if you want, we can have a meeting, and I could use you up there if you want to go up there and gallop, and then maybe transition into assistant." And I was like, "I'm out. I'm ready." So I immediately kind of get the ball rolling on that. Come to Aqueduct with Tony, and we kicked ass from, like, right at the start, and Tony was great. he knew that I wanted to train. He kinda gave me all the tools that I needed to. And it was just kinda like he would check in, like, every couple months. He pretty much just let me do my thing. Well, not do my thing. We'd speak every day. We'd go over the training charts. But as far as, like, executing and, like, the things in between, it was just like he kinda let me run the shed row the way I wanted to. And we won at, like, 25% the entire time that worked for him. And we won plenty of stakes. I was there. So the only time that I would really see Tony was during, Saratoga, and I think when I was there, the I think the 2 summers we did Saratoga together, we won, like, 5 or 6 grade ones together. So it was wild. I
Pretty
remember
decent.
I had that filly So Many Ways for him, and she was undefeated and won the Spinaway and the Schuylerville, and, it was really cool because I pretty much had her from the first day she stepped into the barn up until the time that she won her grade 1, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how, like, you kind of all those bits and pieces that you pick up along the way, and I think it's kinda cool. It seems like you've got it where, like, you kind of took something from everybody else, like, you kind of mold it all together and, make
Mhm.
it kind of your own. I
Yeah.
guess, like, during that time, kind of like a two-part question, like, what do you think the most important skill you learned during those, like, formative years was? And then who was, like, your best boss during those days?
Um, uh, the most well, like you said, I mean, everything that I learned, I feel like there was a lot of do's to learn and a lot of don'ts that I learned along the way. But, everybody that I worked for was they were well established in their careers and, trained elite horses and won elite races. And I was just grateful to have the opportunity to work for such great people. I'm blessed that I was a really talented rider and there was a high demand for me back then. So I got to pick and choose kind of who I wanted to work for. And then what was the second question?
Who was your favorite boss during
My
those
favorite
days?
boss. I liked all of them in their own ways, but Tony's like a father to me. I still talk to him now, and when I have questions about things in horsemanship and training, I'll still call him now because he just has a wealth of knowledge. But I don't know. I thought of him as like a dad and a mentor when I worked for him, and still feel that way even now.
I think you went out on your own, what, like 2014-ish, right?
Yeah, yeah, I had some guys. So Tony had consolidated his string in Fair Hill, and I just didn't really want to leave New York. I had these guys that owned, or not. I had these guys. Tony had these clients of his that owned Frost Giant, the sire, and they were really trying to promote him and get him going. And I had all their horses because they were all New York bred, so they stayed in Aqueduct. And Tony was very kind and let me establish connections with some of his clients, and we had really gotten on well. And so they were like, "Listen, we want to keep the horses in New York. We're not trying to, step on anybody's toes or get, upset Tony. But if we're going to go back to Fair Hill, like we're going to move them to, I don't remember who, we're going to kind of spread them around. But if you want to stay in New York, we'll let you train the majority of the horses." And they had like 3 with Tony, and they're like, "We'll get you more and support you more if you wanna stay here." And I kinda just went on with that. I was like, I told Tony, like, "I know I'm probably starting earlier than I should, but I feel like this is a great opportunity and, just like everything else in my life, just kinda wing it and we'll see what happens." And
100%.
I was really lucky, well, not really lucky, but, we had immediate success right off the bat.
Yeah, I think I've heard you tell the story before of, like, I think it's the second horse you ever saddled, like, under your name, went on and won at a big price too.
Yeah, 75 to 1 or something like that. And in the first runner didn't run bad at all, but we all liked her. She got beat. I think she either ran 2nd or 3rd, just got beat. And then he ran a week later, chased a giant, won at like, yeah, 70 something to 1. And then it was just like, you know, people want to do interviews and I was on, they had HRTV back then. I did HRTV and then I was on TVG and, I started to get the phone started ringing. Had a friend of mine I called owed me or not owed me a favor, but she's like, "We can do you solid." And they wrote an article on me in the Blood Horse. So it was really cool, and everybody was really generous, with giving me time and trying to help promote me, and it helped because the phone started ringing and we filled up quick. I think it went from like 3 or 4 or 5 horses to like 12 or 15 within a few months later. But, just like anything, there was ups and downs because we didn't have, we were hot for a couple months and then, you know, things slowed down and people came and went. So it was the first couple of years were really tough, touch and go.
Who was your first, like, big horse that you'd categorize as your first, like, big horse in your barn?
Well, I was fortunate because the first big horse I had was the second horse I ever bought at a sale, and English Soul, and she kinda put me on the map. She was a real special New York bred filly. She won the Empire Distaff, and she was, an elite New York bred in that division. Like, she wasn't the fastest horse in the world, but she could go long on the dirt, and that was hard to do, but I bought her at the sale for 50,000, and yeah, I bought her at Timonium, and I ran her at Saratoga, like, middle of the meet, which is really hard to do because there's not a lot of time in between. So and she ran second, just got beat, and then she won second time out by, like, a pole on the dirt. It came off, and I kinda kept her on the dirt after that because she was by English Channel. But, yeah, she was a stone cold runner.
And
Yeah.
then I guess, like, if you had to pick, like, a favorite horse you've ever trained, whether it's one that's accomplished the most or one that, you really had to get creative in its training to get going the right way, who would you choose there?
There was a really cool horse that I trained. He was probably, as far as like speed goes, the fastest horse that I've ever trained. His name was Foolish Ghost, and I claimed him, and he was just really psychotic and like mentally just unhinged. And I rode him myself every day, and we just pulled out all the tricks with him, and he started to really come around in my system. Just got confident doing we did a lot of work. We do a lot of, alternative therapies like acupuncture and chiropractic work. We have a round pen, and I've turned him out a lot. I'd alternate his days training. Took him to the pony track, which is like this quarter mile track that's like, for guys that usually like free pony horses, but I'd take him out there when there was no when there's nobody on the track at like 10 right before the track closed. So I'd wait all day long and train him at like 10:20, and that way, because 'cause he'd wanna, like, bolt and run out really bad, so I'd let him just gallop on the outside rail, and I was able to get him to, like, kind of come back and get confidence and train the right way, and we ended up winning the John Morrissey with them, but he won a bunch of, like, nice races, and I claimed him a couple times back and always did well with him, and I think the last time I had him I won with him with, I think Katie Davis wrote it, and I had it with, Chris Dunn and JJ and Grey Horse. Was it? Yeah, I think Grey Horse, yeah. So they're good dudes.
I think that's, like, one of the best parts of horse racing, the people you meet along the way. I
Yeah,
think, like, professionally, you've kinda talked through all the people that, have had an impact in your career, but
yeah.
there's also just, like you also just make friends throughout that you might not even,
Oh
like,
my
work
god,
with per
yeah,
se, but
yeah.
you have, like, a favorite, like, story of how you got in touch with somebody to become a client or, like, any fun stories there?
Well, me when I was younger back in the day and then Palmettos, I went to Palmettos every year, and me, Carlos David, and Johnny Ortiz we were like three musketeers. We were like the we lit the candle. We had the candle burning at both ends, and we all wanted to train. And everybody probably was like, "Yeah, those three guys definitely are never training. They're party animals." But we had a lot of fun and we worked really hard. So and we're still like best friends to this day. Like actually Carlos just shipped the horse into my barn, and I had my 2 runners from Keeneland I shipped into Johnny's barn. But we're like family and we still are to this day. So it's pretty cool. And then like along the way, like me and Jonathan Kitchen have become really good friends. We obviously do the show sometimes here and there, but his wife, Jovanina, and him I've become really close with them. And they're great people. And he knows the city really well. So he has really good taste in food and bars. So I like going out with him because he always has a good hookup.
Yeah, that's huge. Especially in the city too. I feel like it's a place where you need to know somebody to get in
Yeah.
anywhere.
I lived there for a little bit. I don't know it nearly. I lived there for like 2 years, but that guy knows everybody. He knows some, isn't it? He knows everybody somewhere.
Yeah, I wish I had that skill. I feel like I'll never be that guy that like knows everybody.
He's great. He can get the reservation that nobody else can. He's
You
strong.
gotta know a guy. He is the guy.
He is the
He's
guy.
everybody's guy.
Y-
Everyone's got a guy, and he's the
Yeah, he's a
guy.
good dude.
I gotta meet him one day. So more or less, I think might transition to some questions about you. We've got this Oscar performance colt heading up to you soon from Nick Esser's farm in Ocala. Everyone in the group's super excited. And then you kind of mentioned it with English Soul there of the whole like turf versus dirt side of things. Like when a pedigree kind of shows turf, but you try the horse on the dirt. I guess when a horse like first comes in, like kind of take us through the beginning parts of the program and like at what point do you even start thinking about surface to debut on?
Well, when they come in, there's definitely a certain structure. Like there's things that we're gonna hit. Like we're gonna have certain amount of time jogging, a certain amount of time galloping, building a foundation, getting our farrier on them, dentist, doing all that other stuff and getting them all right. Um, and then pressing on forward. I would say, once they've had a couple half-mile workouts, I'll really start deep diving into the pedigrees, but I have a pretty good idea when I buy them what we think they are based on their conformation. I mean, your filly particular or your
Colt, yeah.
colt in particular, I trained the sister, so, I know kinda what his game is, but, it's funny, I ran her only on the turf, but she really breezed well on the dirt. She had a lot of knee issues, and, turf is just forgiving for more forgiving surface with the horse with physical issues. Sorry, I'm having bad allergies. I lost my train of thought. But I had the sister, so even though we only ran her on the turf, I thought that she could always run well on dirt. She always breezed really well on it, and with the colt, I feel like he looks more dirt mint than he does turf, like physically when you look at him. But his pedigree says grass. But I wouldn't be afraid to try. Well, really anything. We're gonna get to Tapeta here in the fall and winter, so I think he's a horse. Traditionally we would have to turn him out because if he was a grass horse, but now we have the option to try him on the Tapeta and see how he does. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I guess like how much is that third surface getting introduced and like the winter going all synthetic? Like how much thought have you put into that in terms of like just strategy and acquisition and kind of I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like when you train a horse, you're kind of thinking so far ahead at all times.
Mhm.
Kind of what's rolling through your brain right now on that side of things?
Well, I wouldn't say training really changes a whole lot, but the going to the sales and buying horses, we've had this. I've known that this was coming, and I've kept it in mind on my purchases for the last few years. So it's definitely been thought out and like premeditated, like our purchases gearing towards running in these synthetic races
For sure.
and having the option for it because we're gonna be spending the longest portion of the year will be on Tapeta. It's gonna be from the end of November until April, the first week of April. So that's a long way to go. 4 months on strictly just Tapeta.
Yeah. As someone that plays the races, like I'm really excited for that because I can do really well at Turfway just betting horses that have synthetic form. I think it's a misconception, at least like what I've seen handicapping, that like turf horses are going to train it to synthetic, and vice versa. Like it's not always the case. I think people give too much credit into recent turf form when you see a horse run 3 times at turf and they hit synthetic. Like
Yeah,
I'm not going to bet it next time out on the synthetic, even though it had good form coming in on the turf.
right. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it's its own entity. I do think, I mean, just like everybody else, I think it favors more dirt horses than it does it favors more turf horses than it does dirt. But I think it should be treated like a third surface because it's very different. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, people have been hesitant. There's a lot of people. It's very polarizing. It's either all yes or all no. It feels like there's very few down the middle, but winter racing has not been great here the past few years, and it's not a great product. So I understand why they're trying to switch things up because we need to get, bettors excited about betting on Naira again. So, and I think we've been losing eyes and money to other tracks that have better products to wager on, including
Yeah.
Turfway, who has synthetic. So
Yeah, and you get like you usually get fuller fields. I mean, part of it's the money and the area you're in with Turfway. It's just like you kind of get all the Ohio breds, the Kentucky boys ship in there. It's like kind of melting pot of all these different spots there. But like
should
I'm
be
curious
interesting. And yeah.
with Can maybe potential for like the Canadians ship in too. Like I think it's gonna create a cool like atmosphere in the first winter.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I don't really know who's gonna show up. I mean, maybe the Canadians, but I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. Who knows what's gonna happen with stuff down in Florida? I think it could, what direction they go in could change the direction of things here too. Maybe people start sending strings further north and staying up here longer, with their synthetic horses too, because there's nowhere really to go, if you have a synthetic horse other than, Presque is just not elite enough for a high level track. And with Gulfstream, Gulfstream's the only other synthetic track on the East Coast that's really significant. Be interesting to see how things play out over the next few years because everybody's kind of invested in these synthetic pedigrees and horses. I don't know. Be interesting.
What was so like I don't have the history in racing to like know when like Keeneland was synthetic at one point, right? Delmar was synthetic. What have like you seen that's like changed in the synthetic services from those days to tracks like Turfway and Gulfstream now?
Well, I think Tapeta has been the most successful surface, and a lot of those tracks, like in California, were using different surface. They were using a Pro Ride and Poly Track, and I think still people call it synthetic the Poly, because it was like the first one, and that was what was at Keeneland, and it was at Turfway as well beforehand, before they stripped it down and put in um Tapeta. So I think Tapeta is probably, in my opinion, the best synthetic surface. I rode on a lot of them. I actually was riding from Michael Matz there at Keeneland when they had Polytrack in, and I thought it rode really nice, and the racing was really competitive. I just think bettors and people didn't like it, so that's why they tore it up and got rid of it because they just were not getting good handle. And um I think it's got some good and bad. I think they still have to tweak it because it freezes in the winter when it like snows and it gets really hard. Like, it'll have like standing water and it'll freeze, and even though it's a synthetic surface, the water's still there. Like they're gonna have to, there's gonna be times where I think we're gonna end up getting stuck not being able to run on it because it's just too hard and too frozen. But if it can bring more horses here and bring more eyes and more money to the racing, then I think it'll be a smart change.
I'm like curious to see the new Belmont Park. Do you have any like
Oh,
inside
yeah.
baseball of like any of the cool features they have with like the
I
hospitality stuff they're doing?
I don't. I heard it's dope though. I heard it's really cool. The suites are gonna be sick, and the out front looks really cool. I mean, we can see it from. I haven't gone over there. Apparently, the first two floors are open, and you can go walk around and check it out. Maybe I should do that, but I haven't. But it looks really cool. The facility looks awesome. So we're supposed to be training on it really soon. It's pretty much done. The dirt is being put in. Everything's done on the inside, like the, tapeta and the turf has been laid out, but they still have to put the dirt in. They, like, have a bunch of different layers, so it's at a certain point right now, but the tapeta should be open really soon
Yeah. I guess
for
like
training.
Is there any like differences? This is a question that a lot of partners had, a lot meaning two. Is there any differences in the way that you train? Is there any difference in the way that you train like a turf horse versus a dirt horse?
Um, well, you have to be harder on dirt horses because dirt racing is just in general, it's a lot more demanding on the body and they have to be fitter. So you can have a less fit horse win grass races. At least that's the principle. So, that's my opinion. But no, I don't think there's anything I don't really train them differently. I just know that you have to have a dirt horse more fit and you have to be harder on them in their training.
Yeah. That's why I think dirt racing will always be king in America. I know if
So
dirt
tough.
racing ever went anywhere, Connor Foley would probably blow a
I'm
gasket.
a dirt guy. I'm a dirt
I'm a dirt
trainer.
guy too. Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's why we run the derby on the dirt, like I'm a dirt trainer. That's why I've had all my success.
Yeah. I think it's interesting for sure to kind of see how everything's like shifting around now with all the different services and which jurisdictions are thriving versus not thriving. Like on that point, I always ask people like the magic wand question I call it, where you have unlimited money, you have unlimited buy-in, like everyone's gonna, pull the rope the same way with you. What's like the one thing that you're gonna do to improve the sport for the long term?
One thing that I would do, I would invest in the youth. I think that's the most important thing, just bringing young people and making horse racing fun. And, I think that we've made a lot of steps that way. I think Naira has been really smart with and obviously Churchill, they've been great with the Downs After Dark and all that. I mean, Kentucky racing is thriving, but when you're in New York, you have Manhattan that's 10 miles away, in Kentucky, there's not a whole lot of options. So when you put on a big event like they do, you're able to attract more people and get more eyes. And that's why Kentucky kills with racing because racing's king there. But I think we've taken a lot of steps to bring in the young people in horse racing in New York. And, they have some good people, great people that are, coming up with ideas to attract young people as well. But that's the most important thing, getting the young people in, because that's the future of everything, in this country.
Yeah, I think the opening of Belmont Park is obviously a huge
Huge.
opportunity, like
Yeah.
in, one of the largest city in the world. That's probably wrong, at least in the US. But it's funny, like I was passing through for work. Like I covered like New Mexico, El Paso. So I was driving through Rio Downs. So of course I pull off.
Heck yeah.
The doors are open, so I'm walking around. Security asks
Yeah.
me what's good. Like it's the guy that's like the head of maintenance there. He's kind of showing me around the place, kind of giving me some
Cool.
history of it. So I Googled the guy that used to own it, R.D. Hubert, and he used to like run Highwood Park at a time. Like
Oh,
he's
wow.
kind of been everywhere, and like that book was pretty cool to see like some of the things they used to do at Hollywood Park, where like they would have like the USC cheerleaders come,
Yeah, I
and
remember
like
that.
they
I
run
remember
mini
that.
bets. They would have a
They had
band
the
in the
night
first
racing.
floor. Yeah, night racing. Like I think that like I hope at least with the new Belmont Park that there's some thought being put into like making it like a night out sort of thing, even if it's not a night thing where it's like you just have a band. Like horse racing itself is a very like Instagrammable like
Totally.
experience, and I think
Yes.
my sales pitch is like you're always a star of your own movie at the racetrack. Whether like you're in it for the fashion, you're in it for the drinks, you're in it for the gambling, like you're the star of your own show for like the minute 12
Yes.
seconds that you bet on a horse, that's your
Yes.
horse. So I just
Yeah.
hope that they like do more to like get people there. Because I think like once people are there, like you can kind of set up experiences while you're there to make sure they have a good time the first time, and then like that will kind of just
Set
snowball.
the set the precedent.
Yeah.
I agree. Hollywood is great. They had like dollar hot dogs, dollar beer. They'd have the cheerleaders there. They did night racing. I'm a big proponent. Like I think aside from the weekend, we should be running like twilight racing. There should be no more day racing. I think just like they used to play the World Series during the day. Like that's how things were way back in the day. But like the times are people are working, people are busy, and I think it gives an opportunity to like, catch a late pick 4, late pick 5 at you start at like 3:30, 4 o'clock. and go till 7:30 or 8 or something like that, something like I think we should be night or twilight racing any other time other than the weekend. I think Saturday, Sunday, you start in the day. Twilight racing, whether I think will probably end up being like Thursdays and Fridays, but that's how it should always be.
Yeah, I totally agree because I think it goes hand in hand with like everything. You have the father picking up his son from school, kind of like back
Right.
to your the way you grew up. Like all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like their tradition is they like dad gets home from work at 5, they throw on their races, and like they're looking over the last 2 races together,
Yeah. At
trying to
Floral
get
Park's
out
right
get
here.
out double. Yeah,
Yeah. The school's right here. My son, I'm getting ready to go pick up my son. We're right around the corner from the track. It's really easy.
yeah. I think it's there's so many like low hanging fruit there. I feel like that's a very obvious one. I feel like a lot of
I've said
tracks
that
don't take
forever.
advantage of it.
I've said it forever. I've said it since they implemented the twilight racing here and there, like on the random Thursdays at Belmont they did before they shut it down. I was like, this should be every day during the week. I mean, maybe in Saratoga because it's the summer. Like, I think that's fine. Like, the Saratoga product sells itself. Like, I don't think we need to change it. But the stuff in between for the other, 9 months a year, 10 months a year, we need to, come up with better ideas. And maybe in the wintertime, we don't, winter in
It's
the
too
aqueduct
cold.
winter meet too cold, just get it done and, get through it. But in the spring and fall, I think we should be running twilight. I think that would
Yeah.
help a lot.
I think so much of it kind of comes to just valuing the on-track experience versus
Yeah.
just all pushing towards like people just betting their phones. It's all like, people betting their phones.
I think people would bet more too during that time because they're not working.
Yeah, 100%. I'm obviously like, a horse racing nerd, but I'm not betting, Keeneland on a Wednesday or Thursday because like I got shit to do.
Right.
I just can't sit around and
Right.
like I wish I could,
Yes.
but like I just can't.
Yeah.
So it's like just meeting
Totally.
people where they're at. I think it's a good example. It's a very good metaphor there with like, even the Cubs put up lights eventually.
Right.
Everyone came
Exactly.
around and put it in. Like everyone's gonna kick and
Yes.
scream. Everyone's gonna kick and scream, but like eventually everyone will get used to it. And like
Yep.
you can even like push back training hours too. I mean, I don't know about all that with the actual horses and like their routines, but
But that if as long as it's not like late, like night racing, it doesn't really affect us too much because we're there anyways. Like,
yeah, feeding time.
yeah, feeding, and then it just goes a little bit later. Like if the last race goes off at 7:30, like that's not really affecting anybody's like, maybe if you're in the last race, but it's only going to happen. You're not going to be in the last race every day. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. Like that'd be an awesome idea. And it's like the other thing that I'm kind of curious. The Churchill Downs putting out these like matchup
I miss this.
bets. So like they announced it yesterday.
Oh,
They
the odds and
base
evens.
well,
Yeah, yeah,
even so they also announced at the same time that they're gonna have select races where they allow you to bet matchups, which I know like Monmouth Park has done with like the Haskell and things like that. But like that's awesome. Like as I think it's like a pathway to like being on the sports books because I think I understand pay-mutual wagering. I think there needs to be stuff done to like ensure that the money's going to the purse account. But like, we need to be on the apps where everybody else is at, and like be like it's just a ton of fun. Like you kind of know, okay, like when you're handicapping, all right, the Derby, like the horse that's gonna, set the pace, go 22 and 40, 45 and 3 is probably gonna finish 17th.
out the bat. Yeah,
But like you could pair that with a matchup of like you have a kind of three-way matchup and you pick your favorite closer in there and it's
yeah,
3-1 and like now like you got a race
yes,
in the race like
yeah.
I think there's just in more innovation like get people A to the track, B have a good time when they're there and like the wagering product needs to
That's great. That's
get
a
with the
great
times.
idea. I never would have thought of that, but now that you're saying it, that makes a lot of sense. I love that.
Yeah, I mean we'll see how it goes at Churchill. I mean like they said it's like only select races and it's like a 17.5% takeout. It's like we'll see how it actually plays out. I always hope they're smart because like I was a little degen in college. Like I used to bet like hockey, and I used to love betting like the three. Like they used to like, that you bet for the three sides, like overtime, team one or team two. I just hope they can get a little bit more juice. So I
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
do the same shit where it's like not just like one versus one, where it's like to kind of give you a chance to get a little bit better odds by picking between
yeah,
like three.
yeah. I mean, listen, Churchill's did they? I can't believe today they bought the Preakness rights. So I don't
Yeah,
know if you saw that, but they're always trying to innovate and do something to better the game, I feel like.
yeah, for sure. All right, we're getting close on time here. And I got paper son. I want to rip
Yeah.
through the rapid fire questions here before we finish up.
All right, let's do it.
All right, favorite racetrack?
Favorite racetrack? Oh, Keeneland or Saratoga? I'm gonna go with Saratoga.
All right, favorite horse of all time?
Horse named Calder won. It was fast as hell. He was like an early 2000s sprinter. It was like he won the summit sprint, the summit of speed at Calder when I was there. So he was a really cool horse.
A good one. I'll look him up after. I love
You
asking
look
that
him up.
question because I go out because I always get on a rabbit hole after.
Oh, sorry. Go
All
ahead.
right, favorite big day of racing? Belmont Stakes
Uh,
Day or Derby Day or Breeders' Cup Friday.
favorite big day of racing that I've been a part of, I guess Travers Day.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's like kind of tail end of Saratoga meet too. Like it's very much a celebration. Like,
Yes.
yeah, that's a good one. All right, last two could be horse racing related, could be horse racing related. First one is when you hear the word successful, who is the first person you think of?
Baffert.
Doing. All right, and then the last one to close us out is if you had to give advice to younger Ray, what advice would you give him?
You'll get there eventually. Don't worry.
I
Because
feel like
all I
he's
wanted
pretty
to
chill
do
overall.
because I was just so impatient, but I don't know. I feel like my impatience kind of got me where I am, but I was just so worried and stressed about like not becoming a trainer. It seemed I can't tell you, like it seemed like this unclimbable mountain and I felt like so many times like I was just like, just well, I was like this little kid just dreaming and like I just felt like it was never gonna actually come true. And then one day it just happened. And I wish I could tell myself, like, "Don't stress and don't panic, it's gonna come."
All right. Well, I
Cool, man.
appreciate this, Ray. We'll have to do it
Thanks,
again
brother.
sometime soon, but looking
Appreciate
forward
it.
to everything that's to come.
Appreciate it, bro.
Thanks, Ray.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Peace.